Hello. This is the story of Joe's prayer cards. Joe and I married in 2000, and a few years into our marriage I can remember Joe asking me what I would like for my birthday. At the time I had my eye on a copy of David Stern's complete Jewish Bible. She duly obliged and gave it to me with the inscription, "To Colin. I hope this helps you to understand better the greatest gift of all. With all my love, Joe." The greatest gift of all is the love that God gives, and Joe certainly demonstrated that. Although this was her gift to me, it ended up that she read it mostly. In 2009, Joe had a revelation while reading Proverbs for a cross-stitch project. This happened while she was reading the complete Jewish Bible and came across a verse in Proverbs 10:9 which reads, "He who walks purely walks securely, but he who walks in crooked ways will be found out." It was about the time of the MP's expenses scandal, and Joe felt God give her a vision to send prayer cards with the first part of the verse, "He who walks purely walks securely," cross-stitched on them to every member of both the House of Commons and the House of Lords in Parliament. At the time there were 650 MPs and 794 Lords. In 2009, Joe wrote down her vision. She wrote, "It was the first part of the verse that caught my attention, and as I read it, the Lord dropped into my spirit a very simple cross-stitch design with the idea to turn it into cards to be sent to every member of the House of Commons and the House of Lords. From the time I first received this vision, it has been clear that I am to include as many people as possible in it, and therefore I'm looking for people who will catch this vision and have the skills and the time to get involved in this with me." It struck me that this phrase was a fantastic soundbite that could strike a chord with those who would receive it, as modern politics seems to be full of slogans and clever words. The wording for the inside of the cards will read, "May true wisdom guide you in all you do." Joe faithfully made the design and then began cross-stitching the insert. Although Joe was open to others helping her stitch, she was not always happy with the standard that came back, so she ended up stitching most of them by herself. Even when she was diagnosed with kidney failure, she kept faithfully stitching. At first the kidney failure was managed with drugs and then peritoneal dialysis, which could be done at home. In October 2013 she received a kidney from Janice, her mum. In August 2014 she was suffering from a pain in her hip which was initially diagnosed as sciatica. However, this was later diagnosed as a life-threatening disease, non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Still, she kept stitching right up until the day she died in January 2015. There were 731 prayer cards completed, about halfway. I had promised her before she died that no matter what happened, I would do what I could to get the project finished. However, not being a cross-stitcher, I knew I needed help. A friend and someone who knew Joe personally wrote an article with an appeal which went out in March of that year. The appeal, together with a few who knew Joe personally, resulted in 84 volunteers who were given cross-stitch kits and asked to prayerfully sew them. By September 2016, we had enough inserts completed for all members of Parliament, and by the next month, all the inserts had been put in cards. I was advised to contact my local MP, Clive Lewis, who, with the help of the MP in the area Joe grew up, Nicky Morgan, helped compose a covering email. After that, all the cards were addressed and boxed. I arranged to go down to London to meet with Nikki and Clive and also to drop off the prayer cards. Although the date was fixed about 3 weeks in advance, it so happened that the day before the meeting, Theresa May called a general election. That evening, 2 people contacted me to advise me not to send the cards at this point. But emotionally, I wanted to honour my promise to Joe and so was minded to go ahead and deliver them. The plan was that we'd meet the MPs and then go off to the drop-off point. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. on the 19th of April 2017. As no word of cancellation had been sent, I set out with my friend Hilda, who regularly travelled to Parliament to pray. Several people were praying for us that day. I drove down to London, parked at a tube station, and then we took the tube to the centre of London. While on the tube, I noticed I'd missed a call with a voicemail. When I listened to it, the message was from somebody called John, who said in the light of the election being called, the meeting we had arranged was cancelled. My first thought was, you can't cancel now, we're nearly there. So I prayed. A little later there was an email on my phone that said to follow up with the meeting with a message left. The meeting with Clive was cancelled, but we should still be able to meet with Nikki. I thought that was something, but still wanted more. So I prayed again for more. After that, an email arrived saying it may be possible to see Clive, but it would be later in the morning. We arrived in London in plenty of time, and so we had to wait a little before we could be seen. When the time came, John, an assistant to Clive Lewis, collected us and took us to Nikki. We had a good meeting with her. I gave her the card addressed to her and she opened it. She was quite moved by it. In a way, I wasn't surprised by it. I knew she was a Christian and a mother and would appreciate the message and the heart behind it. We chatted and had our photos taken. One thing that impressed me, that she was not trying to cut the meeting short but had time for us. The meeting came to a natural conclusion and John led us out. As we went down the corridor, he told us that he would try and call Clive, who was notorious for switching his phone off. He put a little distance between us and made a call. When he came back, he told us that amazingly he had spoken to Clive and he would see us in half an hour. I suggested a cuppa, to which John was also minded to do. So we went down to the cafe area and chatted over hot drinks. It was interesting to get to know John, and he was interested in finding out about us and about Joe. True to his word, half an hour later, Clive turned up. I handed Clive his copy of the prayer card, which he opened, and to my surprise, knowing he was a humanist, he was quite moved by it. He said these are wise words, and he could get behind it. Clive was quite chatty and looked at the prayer cards from a practical point of view. It was speaking to him that made me see that it would be wiser to delay the sending of the cards. So I made the difficult decision to delay sending the cards until after the election results were known. The election came and went, with the unexpected result of no overall majority. I ordered new envelopes, modified them labels, printed new letters for the newly elected MPs. A week after the Queen's speech, I travelled down to London and dropped off the boxes filled with the completed cards. Finally, the promise I made was fulfilled. Now I had expected to hear nothing or see nothing more of this, but less than a week later the responses from parliamentarians started arriving. A few were simple acknowledgements, but most were personal letters, and no two were the same. Several said things like, "I will treasure this card," or "I have placed the card in my parliamentary office," or "What a wonderful lady Joe must have been." Many expressed condolences for Joe's death. Others have said this is a timely message, or that they will endeavour to live by the message. Many said this was a wonderful, welcome change from their usual mail. The cards have been described as beautiful, exquisite and wonderful. As of 2022, there have been over 350 individual responses. I know that during her lifetime, many were moved by Jo. But what is clear from these responses is that even after her death, through her fulfilled vision, she touched many more. That's the end. Thank you. Thank you for listening.